Hi everyone, welcome to Bourbon Obsessed Bourbon News for November 29th. I am Ed from BourbonObsessed.com, also known on Instagram as Bourbon_Obsessed. You're listening to the podcast version of my biweekly Bourbon News newsletter. The print version can be found on BourbonObsessed.com. I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. My wife and I definitely did. We were invited to one of our friends' houses and had a great time as well as lots of amazing food. I also had a little down-home bourbon. I had never tried anything from them before and don't know much about it other than it was bottled at Whiskey Thief Distilling. It was their 12-year-old Kentucky bourbon batch 2, and I have to say, I was very impressed. I hope you all had some great bourbon too. But for now, let's get on with the news. There are changes happening at the Brown-Forman Corporation. Campbell P. Brown will step down as chair of directors in July. He's held that position since 2021. Subject to his re-election at the annual meeting, he'll continue to serve on the board as a director. Marshall B. Farrer, a fifth-generation descendant of the company's founder and a current director of the board, will assume the role of chair, subject to his re-election to the board. Preservation Distillery and Farm in Bardstown had an abrupt closure in early September, right before the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. They also withdrew from the festival and postponed the release of their first estate-distilled bourbon, which is a 7-year-old pot-distilled wheated bourbon. The good news is that they have reopened as of November 16th, and the bourbon release is now scheduled for December 6th at 10 a.m. I am not sure why the press release for this product was sent to me recently, since it appears to already be sold out. However, it's too ridiculous not to mention, and I'm still wondering if it is real. Nonetheless, if you ever wanted to attach a Southern Comfort Shooter mini bottle dispenser to your Xbox Series X console, then the So console is for you. Or at least it could be if they become available again. The dispenser also has a remote control so you can dispense shooters from up to 80 yards away, which I am sure someone has a good reason for doing. If they restock, the link to purchase was in the store on the Sazerac House website. Ohio State Senator Bill DeMora has introduced a bill, Senate Bill 320, that would require high-demand allocated bottles of spirit to be opened and immediately resealed at the time of purchase. The goal of the bill is to deter flippers. I'll assume everyone listening to this podcast is familiar with that term, but just in case you aren't, flippers are people who buy bottles of bourbon and then resell them at a higher price. However, it sounds like the bill is unlikely to pass for a variety of reasons. Finally, the next time you are having a difficult time finding a bottle of Weller 12, maybe consider a trip to India. The Sazerac company is now launching the brand there, starting with Weller Special Reserve and Weller 12. However, bottles are not going to be cheap. The price will range from the equivalent of $29 to $53 for Special Reserve and from $64 to $92 for Weller 12, depending on which state in India it is purchased in. India has some very high tariffs and taxes on alcoholic beverages that are reflected in these prices. Also, there is a large variation in taxes between different states, and hence the wide price range for each expression. Alright, now let's move on to new whiskey releases. There are a few. For the first time since 2022, Master Distiller Dan McKee and Master of Maturation Andrea Wilson have approved the release of Michter's 20-year Kentucky Straight Bourbon. According to Michter's Master of Maturation Andrea Wilson, the Michter's 20-year is a remarkable drinking experience. It's luxurious and expansive, a broad palette of flavor that culminates in a viscous, dark, and richly complex finish. That sounds pretty good. I haven't tasted this bourbon, but would certainly like to. I have tried a couple of the past releases of the 20-year and they were excellent. This one is bottled at 114.2 proof and is priced at $1,200. Even so, it will probably be difficult to find at that price. Hidden Barn Bourbon from my friends at Neely Family Distillery is releasing their 2024 Madeira finished bourbon. It's aged for 6 years and then finished for 7 months in Madeira casks. Master Distiller Royce Neely and Master Blender Jackie Zykan named this year's release Perfect Harmony due to what they felt was the perfect balance between the bourbon and the residual Madeira left in the barrel. It's bottled at 99.9 proof and priced at $89.99. Multiple Grammy winner Derek Trucks announced the second release of his Ass Pocket Whiskey, also known as APW. It's a limited holiday edition of his 10-year-old Kentucky Straight Bourbon. It's bottled at 122.5 proof, which is a play on the date of Christmas, December 25th or 1225, and it's aptly named Holiday Proof. Similar to his first release, the bourbon is again packaged in 200 milliliter bottles. His reasoning behind the small bottles is to let people enjoy high-quality whiskey without the pressure of hoarding of a full-size bottle that remains sealed. I can see that. It's nice to make an older whiskey available for a lower price, and maybe people would be more apt to open a small bottle than they would a 750 milliliter. However, at $65 for a 200 milliliter bottle, that's the equivalent of almost $244 for a 750 milliliter bottle. For a 10-year-old bourbon, that's a pretty steep price. Jones Distillery has announced their 10th anniversary Founders Blend. It is an homage to the distillery's namesake and master distiller Arlen A.J. Jones' grandfather, the famous moonshine still maker Alfred Casey Jones. Casey's copper square stills, also known as coffin stills, could fit easily in the back of a pickup truck, which made them perfect for when a moonshiner needed to make a quick getaway. Therefore, the Founders 10th Anniversary Edition is a unique blend of Kentucky Straight Bourbon whiskey and Barrel Cut, which is a proprietary spirit distilled from Casey Jones' moonshine mash bill of corn and cane. It's bottled at 103.3 proof and priced at $99.99, but it's sold only at the distillery. However, at the distillery on Friday, today, November 29th, and Saturday, November 30th, they'll be having a community event which includes a bottle your own experience, live music, cocktails, and food truck fare. That sounds like fun, so it may just be worth making the trip to Hopkinsville. Pendleton Whiskey unveiled the company's first bourbon and first new whiskey release in nearly a decade, called Pendleton 1910 Bourbon. According to the company, it's crafted with a blend of high and low rye bourbons and cut to proof with glacier-fed spring water from Oregon's Mount Hood. Just like their Pendleton whiskey is distilled in Canada, but proofed down with Mount Hood water, I think that this bourbon is probably distilled at MGP and then similarly proofed down with Mount Hood water, although I can't find that explicitly stated on the company website. Nonetheless, in the copyright information, they list the address of Pendleton Distillers as Lawrenceburg, Indiana. So I think it's safe to assume that's where the bourbon was distilled, and maybe even where it was proofed down. It's aged 10 years, bottled at 90 proof, and priced at $49.99. Finally, New Riff Distilling announced their latest release of winter whiskey. If you're not familiar with it, it's been around for a few years now and has a bit of a following. I happen to be a fan. It's a bourbon crafted with malted oats and chocolate malt, as well as corn, of course. This year's release will be available starting at 11 a.m. on Friday, November 29th, that's today, at the distillery gift shop, as well as online, and will soon be at retailers. Also, if you head to the distillery, all weekend they're having a special on winter whiskey pours, and today, which is Friday, you can also get your pour with or without mashed potatoes and pot roast. The bourbon is bottled in bond, so it's therefore bottled at 100 proof, and it's priced at $54.99. Well, that about does it for this week. I hope you have enjoyed this edition of the Bourbon Obsessed Bourbon News Podcast. Be sure to like and follow us at your preferred podcast provider so that you don't miss an episode. You can also head over to bourbonobsessed.com to read the print version of my newsletter and sign up to have it delivered directly to your inbox. While you're on my website, you can also read some of our over 300 bourbon reviews and over 50 distillery write-ups. Lastly, you can find me on Instagram at bourbon_obsessed, I'm the one with the blue check mark, and on Facebook at Bourbon Obsessed, all one word. Have a great rest of the weekend.